In this lecture, we'll cover the basics of standards and auditing. We'll talk about how standards are used, identify where they came from, and discuss how they're developed. We'll also explore their benefits and discover how they're defined. When we get to auditing, we'll examine their features, discuss the different types of audits, and look at why auditing is a challenging activity. We have a full plate today, so we'd better begin. Standards are as old as business. When the first sellers and buyers bargained years ago, they used standards. For instance, if a buyer wanted a cow, it had to meet health, age, and size standards. And a seller wouldn't accept any type of payment. He needed payment for the cow in the right form of currency, perhaps a few gold coins. Things really haven't changed that much. Today's standards come in all types and forms. There are national, international, industry, and government standards. Some apply to manufacturing, some to services, some to the military, and some to communications. Standards are a way of life because they are everywhere and have become second nature in so many settings. In a basic sense, standards solve problems and provide solutions. If you're ill and buy an approved drug in the United States, you believe that it will make you well because of the standards that drug suppliers must meet. Likewise, if you rent a DVD, you know you can watch it that night unless the prior renter spilled a soft drink on it. Standards can either be voluntary or mandatory. Governments mandate standards to protect the public in the areas of health, safety, food, drugs, and the environment. Customers can also enact standards. Think of a supplier who sends a proof of certification with an order. Industries such as trade, transport, communications, science, and technology also use standards. They reflect agreements for how activities and transactions will occur. When companies use standards in the right way, they bring markets and regions together. However, when used in the wrong way, standards can be unfair. For example, if they're not well defined or disclosed, it's hard for those who are not in the know to take part. Because of these issues, countries have eliminated many unfair standards and also harmonized fair ones so they support each other and don't conflict. Let's now turn to learn how standards were created and also who's involved. Although standards have been around for a long time, they were isolated to certain countries. A standard in Italy, defined by the metric system, was different from a standard in the United States, defined by the English system of measures. Interestingly, the US actually made an effort to adopt the metric system in 1790 when Thomas Jefferson proposed a decimal-based system. If you think of a US dollar, it follows the metric system, 100 cents. As the world began to industrialize during the late part of the 19th century, a few groups tried to create global standards to promote world trade. The International Electrotechnical Commission, IEC, which held its first meeting in the US in 1904, was one such group. 10 years later, the IEC formed groups to deal with names, symbols, and ratings of electrical machinery. After two big delays because of World War I and II, where no standards were developed, efforts to develop global standards resumed. Delegates from 25 countries met in London in 1946 to discuss creating a new organization that would establish and manage widely accepted standards. That same year, their efforts led to the creation of the International Organization for Standardization, known as ISO. Along with the IEC, made up of delegates from more than 50 nations, ISO is a major force. ISO is so huge that we will devote a great deal of time to it later in the course. ISO creates thousands of standards in all fields except electrical and electronic engineering. ISO and IEC agree that the IEC will handle all standards that relate to electricity. In addition to ISO and IEC, the International Telecommunications Union, ITU, plays a global role by representing the concerns of telecommunication firms. ISO, IEC, and ITU maintain a joint mission statement that commits their efforts to areas that overlap, such as information technology. Standard systems are either national or international. Each country uses different types of accreditation groups to inform buyers and sellers that standards are set and met. One such group is the privately run American National Standards Institute, abbreviated as ANSI. National standards organizations are usually private. However, the government does play a major role in setting voluntary standards. For instance, many dues-paying government groups take part in ANSI functions. Now that you know how standards are used and where they come from, let's see how they're developed and complied with. Regardless if standards are voluntary or national or global or mandatory, they must, and usually do, follow these guidelines. First, the standards organization should have legal status as the authorized body to prepare the standards. In some cases, more than one group tries to put forth standards. Imagine the turmoil for a company trying to use a standard when there is no clear-cut direction. For example, the use of electronic data interchange, EDI, has been slowed because of different organizations creating standards for software. When there are numerous national standards bodies, one body must be given responsibility to represent a nation's interest. Also, support for standards must come from all affected entities. These groups include government, industry, professional, consumer, and research groups. Standards should be prepared by teams and meet the needs of all stakeholders. Standards writing committees should consult with all parties and strive for consensus. Although standards seem like a great thing to have, people don't always want to follow them. They view them as red tape that will be a waste of time. So why should you adopt and follow them? The main benefit that standards provide is economic. Hundreds of companies who sell to the US government can't stay in business unless they are willing to comply with standards. Europe is a similar story. Before products can enter Europe, many of them must contain a CE mark. The bottom line is that when companies agree with and follow standards, the flow of trade increases. When they disagree, they're likely to lose business. To be part of the flow, companies must be aware of all current standards that relate to their business. They must also create a tracking system to keep on top of changes and releases of new standards. To help you stay informed, I suggest that you join professional groups, go to annual conferences, and become part of technical committees and advisory groups that manage standards. When you track standards, it forces you to be aware of what's going on in domestic and foreign markets. This helps your business because you meet new people and make vital contacts. Being conversant with and adhering to standards also leads to developing a business presence in foreign markets. Other reasons to follow standards include that they help generate low-cost answers to ongoing production problems in the areas of design, assembly, packaging, and delivery. They protect health, safety, property, and the environment from hazards related to making, using, and disposing of products. They also provide rules to prevent and fight fires and explosions and to reduce chemical and radiation risk. They ensure interchangeable and compatible products and services within and between industries. They provide a source to assess the quality of products and services in order to prevent disputes, and they also help to bring about a common understanding and collaboration between different companies. Now that we know about the origin, the need, and the benefits of standards, we need to develop a working definition of them.